Thanks for the kind words, sir. Just to give you a brief background, we had guidelines for the management formulated under RNTCP in 2003, and they came into force in 2004. But the diagnostic algorithm at that time was mainly sputum based, as you see, and there was no defined role of MONTU, chest X-ray, or this alternative specimens, IGRA, ELISA, newer diagnostics. So there were issues in the diagnosis. Then now coming to the treatment part, the 2004 guidelines, the innovation was that rifampicin was available for the first time in tablet form, and there was a strategy which was adopted, that was DOTS, directly observed treatment short course, and we devised 4 weight bands for our children. Then came the WHO 2006 guidelines, WHO 2010, followed by the IAP consensus of childhood tuberculosis in 2010 again, and finally the pediatric respiratory reviews. These led us to understand, and also the standards of TB care in India, that was the evidence-based development, in which there were different standards. First 6 were diagnosis, then came treatment, public health, and social inclusion. This led us to realize that IAP and RNTCP, the goal was same, but we were following different paths, and we needed to arrive at a consensus on certain issues. So this led us to the formulation of the revised RNTCP IAP guidelines, as they are called, and the meeting was held in 2012. The objectives was that what indicates TB. Now we sat down together for 2 days and had brainstorming sessions, and each and every part was made clear-cut and concise, precise. But still, I would say there are still some issues which, obviously, as science evolves, the program is also evolving. But the objective in diagnosis was that what indicates tuberculosis, we needed to define that. That is symptom characteristics, X-ray, radiology, then TST, the dose of PPD, the interpretation of TST, the role of ELISA, PCR, IGRAs, and the newer rapid diagnostic tests. But in spite of all this, there is still a significant overlap between TB and non-TB. So the dynamics of TB diagnostic is that it is a combination. The diagnosis is based on a combination of definitive signs and symptoms, contact with an infectious case, I'll be talking about that in detail further, a positive TST, a suggestive chest X-ray, ruling out alternative diagnosis, and finally the gold standard, that is the microbiological confirmation by either smear, stain, culture, and the newer diagnostics, that is CBNAT. So this is the diagnostic pathway, and the specificity increases as we go down the ladder. So TB or no TB, that's the biggest question when we are diagnosing a case of tuberculosis. So which test should be done, and which diagnostic algorithm to be followed? So the diagnostic algorithm which I'll be discussing now is primarily based on to take care of a child who has never had a history of prior ATT. That is, we presume that that's probably a drug-sensitive tuberculosis case, and it does not include the drug-resistant TB suspects. That is the 4 categories, that is the defaulters, relapse, and treatment failures or HIV. And we have done proper characterization of the symptomatology. Like you're all aware, some symptoms like cough is such a common symptom. Almost 20% of children, they have cough. But what we are looking here at is persistent cough. Same is true for a child, very frequent symptom, not growing well. It is a relatively soft sign. But what we are looking at is the objective measurement of the weight, that whether the child has lost weight or is not gaining weight. And So the symptom characterization of presumptive tuberculosis is that whenever there is a persistent, not each and every clause of this symptom characterization is important. Persistent unexplained fever more than 38 degrees centigrade recorded at least once, with or without persistent non-remitting cough of recent origin lasting more than 2 weeks, definitive unexplained loss of weight or appetite, that is, if a child loses more than 5% of the highest recorded weight within last 3 months, history of contact with any form of active tuberculosis within last 2 years. Now this does not necessarily mean that it's only sputum positive tuberculosis. Any active tuberculosis, that is the catch over here, because we assume that there are significant adults who may be smear negatives, but they may be expectorating at any one time or the other. So, and presence of risk factors. We are all aware of the risk factors. Such a patient should be investigated for pulmonary tuberculosis, and the following algorithm will be followed. So whenever we have, now we do not call it as a suspect. Initially we used to call it as suspect, but now we call it as presumptive tuberculosis. So such a child would obviously be subjected to 2 sputum smears, a chest x-ray and a TST. Now, if the sputum is positive, it is clear-cut case of a bacteriologically confirmed tuberculosis. But if it is smear negative or smear is not available, then depending upon the chest x-ray and the MON2, the child is classified into 4 different categories. That is, if the chest x-ray is highly suggestive, with or a chest x-ray not suggestive but MON2 is negative, and a chest x-ray normal with a TST positive, and a chest x-ray normal with a TST negative. So chest x-ray normal with a TST negative straight cut, look for alternative causes. It is probably not tuberculosis. Now chest x-ray normal with TST positive, in these cases maybe it is an extrapulmonary involvement. So if depending upon the symptoms of the child, the workup will go ahead with the extrapulmonary tuberculosis. Now the 2 where you have a chest x-ray which is highly suggestive. Now in this case, we again subject the child to a sputum or a CB-NAT. If it is positive, then it is again bacteriologically confirmed. I'll be talking of what is X-ray suggestive in my later slides. But so if it is X-ray suggestive, we subject the child again to the CB-NAT on the sputum or the alternative specimens, that is the gastric lavage or induced sputum or ball. And if any is positive, it is again a bacteriologically confirmed case. And in cases of non-specific shadows like consolidation or thin-walled cavities, such a child is given a course of antibiotics. And mind you, we prefer something like MOX. Don't prescribe fluoroquinolones or linezolid because they have ATT activity. So a 7 to 10 day course of antibiotics followed by a review. If the persistent review with the chest x-ray and symptomatology, if they still persist, that is the x-ray findings, they are still there along with the symptoms, again we subject such a child, we try to fish out the organism from the alternative specimens. Again, if it is positive or if it is negative, such a child with persistent symptoms and radiology is then labeled as clinically diagnosed pulmonary tuberculosis. You know, initially we were using the terms sputum positive and sputum negative, or smear positive and smear negative. Now those 2 terms, they have been replaced by clinically diagnosed, that is smear negatives are called now clinically diagnosed and smear positives are called as bacteriologically confirmed. But mind you, for all patients who are diagnosed of tuberculosis, we always ask the parents to get a HIV testing done after the counseling. This is very important. So as I said, linezolid and quinolones, they should not be used, and in cases of persistent symptoms, non-specific shadows, then you repeat with this alternative specimens, CB-NAT, or you refer the child to expert for workup of persistent pneumonia. So this is our presumptive tuberculosis. What we do is we do a sputum examination, a chest X-ray, a TST. So all these combination is what we call as, I'll be discussing each of these three important diagnostic tools one by one. Very briefly, I'll have to run through because we are running short of time. Now coming to the bacteriological evidence, it is recommended that all efforts should be made to demonstrate AFB, and where sputum is unavailable for examination, then alternative specimens, as I've already said, gastric lavage, induced sputum, BAL, they should be collected depending upon the feasibility under the supervision of a pediatrician. So most important is wherever they are available. Under the program they are not available, each and every test is not available, like BAL would be available in bigger centers like Fortis, but not at a peripheral center. So we have to modulate our diagnostic algorithm along the needs. The measures to increase the yield, you're all aware that culture is more than smear. Induced sputum, we are all aware that induced sputum is effective in those children who are giving, older children who are giving repeated saliva samples. It is less invasive though, but there is a higher risk of transmission. Now coming to gastric aspirate or gastric lavage, you are all aware how to do it. Trained staff is required, same. So we are training our workers for the program to carry out, but still it would be available only in the district centers. So coming to which is better, gastric lavage or induced sputum, it is all, as I said, depending upon the feasibility. Whichever is available, you need to try that. Now there have been some studies which say that neutralization is required, but a study done by Professor Virinder Singh, it shows that no neutralization is required. Now if delay is expected, that is beyond 4 hours, we need to preserve it in a fridge with CPC as the storing preservative. Now, as I said, which is better, gastric aspirate, BAL versus induced sputum? There have been so many studies, all showing, some studies say gastric lavage is better, others say induced sputum is better. So whatever it is, at the end of the day, as I said, hospital setting is an important deciding factor. Wherever, whatever is available needs to be offered to the child. But our own data, it shows that children, almost 1100 children, 818 were able to, we were able to do a sputum smear examination, out of which almost half of them were smear or culture positive. So this data includes gastric lavage, induced sputum, and the alternative specimens. So this positivity increases obviously as with age. So although the disease, we realize that it is possibicillary and sample collection is difficult and problematic in children, but still children of all ages, they do have bacilli in the biological specimen, and attempt should always be made to demonstrate AFB. So now coming to the newer tests, do we need newer tests? The answer is yes. Why do we need newer tests? You're all aware, now we are facing the challenge of multi-drug resistant and even XDR in children, even total drug resistance. I've had a case of congenital XDR referred from my hometown, that is Patiala, but unluckily that newborn died within 7 days. So now the scenario is open in pediatrics. So that is why we need this rapid diagnostic techniques, and to optimize, to make an early and a rapid diagnosis, optimize our treatment, and also improve the outcome for our children, because the time is precious, and also to limit the transmission and identify the hotspots. Mumbai is a hotspot, but I